Welcome to The Timeless Mind, your fast track to life-changing wisdom from the world's most powerful books. If you crave the timeless lessons of the greatest minds, but don't have hours to spare, well, you're in the right place. This is Series 2, Episode 7, Decoding Existence. Heidegger's journey through being and time. Let's dive in.
Being and Time by Heidegger. I mean, just hearing that title, it feels like you're about to, climb a mountain, a very intellectual, philosophical mountain.
I got this reputation,
Yeah.
a monumental work, a challenging work. But that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive for you,
Absolutely.
to kind of give you a path through some of the really fundamental ideas and questions so you can have a good grasp of what Heidegger was trying to do without getting, too lost in all the academics.
Yes.
Think of it as like your shortcut.
Your cheat sheet. Yeah. To a really foundational piece of philosophy.
Exactly.
And, at its core, this book, it tackles a question that seems so basic.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to be? And it's kind of remarkable when you think about it that Heidegger argues that this really fundamental question, which you think would be the bedrock of all philosophy, has actually been overlooked or treated really superficially throughout the history of Western thought.
Yeah. And our guide for this is going to be Heidegger himself. We're taking excerpts directly from Being and Time.
Okay.
We're going to be unpacking some of his core ideas. Obviously, the idea of being itself, this word that he introduces, Dasein, and looking at how we as Dasein relate to being and to the world around us. And the goal is to bring about those aha moments for you, where some of these concepts, which can be tricky, start to, maybe make a little more sense.
Okay. So let's start unpacking this, shall we, with this idea of the forgotten quotient of being.
Okay.
So Heidegger, he makes a pretty strong claim. He says that despite centuries of what we call metaphysical inquiry, that branch of philosophy that really deals with the nature of reality, the most fundamental question, what it means for something to be, has been neglected.
It's kind of wild, right? Because, philosophy has always been interested in entities.
Right. In what it is.
Yeah, in things that are. But he argues that it hasn't really, truly delved into the being of those entities, like that underlying condition that makes them be in the first place.
Okay.
So, like, take a table, right? Like a table is an entity.
Yeah.
But its being isn't the wood that it's made of. It's not its shape.
Right.
It's the very fact that it is a table, that it exists as a table, and can serve a purpose.
Okay.
So Heidegger felt like philosophers were so focused on describing the table,
right,
giving all the details about it, that they forgot to ask, well, what does it mean for it to be at all?
Right. And so he traces this neglect really far back, even to the ancient Greeks.
Yeah.
We've got figures like Plato and Aristotle. I mean, you think those guys would have nailed this.
You would think, right. They would have laid the groundwork.
Yeah.
And they certainly did some of that. Aristotle, in particular, he even recognized that being wasn't just another category.
Right.
That you could sort of neatly define. He saw it as a transcendental universal, which basically means it's something you understand through analogy rather than just, putting it in a box.
Right.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Even with this insight, Heidegger says, look, Aristotle still didn't really clarify all the connections that are going on there. Like, it's like he kind of pointed to a door, but didn't quite figure out how to open it.
Oh, okay. So even Aristotle, even for all his brilliance, there were still aspects of this that were a little murky for him.
According to Heidegger, that's right. And it doesn't stop there. Right? Medieval ontology, you have Aquinas, you have Duns Scotus, and then even later, giants like Hegel.
Right.
Heidegger says, even though they did important things, they kind of continued on similar paths. And they didn't really get at that core clarity of a being itself. Hegel, he defined being as the indeterminate immediate. But Heidegger was like, no, that's not quite it either.
Okay. So it's like this big historical sweep
that
he's making. So he's really setting the stage for why he felt we need a radical rethink.
Yes. A completely radical rethink.
This isn't just about refining. It's like, we've got to go back to the drawing board.
Exactly. From the very beginning.
Yeah. And for you, the listener, wanting to be well-informed, this really highlights something.
Yeah.
That even these really foundational ideas and philosophy things, we might assume, oh, yeah, we've got this figured out. They can be really murky, and they require a much, much deeper level of inquiry.
Yeah, you can't take anything for granted.
Right.
And that brings us to this really interesting idea about the proximity of understanding being.
Okay.
So even though we can't necessarily, like, right away define what being is, Heidegger suggests, look, it's not totally alien to us either.
Yeah.
We have some sense of it.
Right.
He says that our everyday understanding, even though it might be kind of vague and we don't articulate it,
Yeah.
it's already, it's full of all these traditional theories and opinions about being.
Okay.
But we don't even realize it necessarily.
We've inherited them. We've just kind of absorbed them.
Exactly. And they act almost like a veil in a way.
Right.
That prevents us from seeing being, in its kind of more pure form.
Okay.
It's like, trying to see the sky through a dusty window.
Oh.
You can kind of see it, but there's all this stuff in the way.
Right. It's obscuring the view.
Exactly.
Oh.
So it's not like we have to, discover something entirely new. It's more about uncovering what's already there.
Peeling back those layers.
Exactly. These pre-existing influences to get to a more fundamental understanding.
Right. And so that really resonates with your interest in, really getting knowledge thoroughly.
Yeah.
It's not just about the superficial. It's about going deep.
Digging down.
Yeah.
To the root.
Okay. Now, Heidegger introduces a really, I think, crucial distinction to help us with this. And he uses the terms ontological and ontical, which sound, I'll be honest, like philosophical jargon.
Right.
But it's a really important key, I think, to understanding what he's trying to do.
Yeah. So let's unpack this a little bit. When he says ontological, he's talking about being itself.
Okay.
Like that fundamental condition of being.
Okay.
So like, what does it mean to be?
Okay.
But ontical deals with specific entities. Like things that are.
Okay.
And the facts about them.
Got it.
So if you were to ask, like, I don't know, why is this table brown? That would be an ontological question. You're asking about a specific entity.
Okay.
Like this table.
Got it.
The ontological question is more like, well, what does it mean for this table to be at all?
So it's like the difference between looking at the characteristics of something and actually looking at the very core of its existence?
Exactly. It's the difference between asking, like, what it is and that it is. Yeah. So when Heidegger asks the question of being, he's not asking about this thing or that thing. He's asking about that which determines entities as entities.
Okay.
So it's almost like a principle that makes things be what they are.
Okay. Got it.
And he uses the example of science.
Okay.
Right? So science, when it's trying to, come up with true statements about specific entities, about things that are, he says, well, look, science operates in the ontical mode.
Got it.
It's looking at what is.
Right.
And trying to figure out, facts about the world. And that's one way that that Dasein behaves, and we'll get to what that means in a minute.
Okay.
But it's not, the only way, or even the most fundamental way that we relate to being.
Okay.
So, yeah, science tells us a lot about the world.
It gives us information, but it doesn't answer the core question of being.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean for that world to be at all?
Right.
And for us to be in it?
So, grasping this distinction between the ontological and the ontical helps us understand, I think, what level he's operating on.
Exactly. And it helps, like, if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by all this, which is understandable.
Yeah.
It's a way to kind of orient yourself, right?
Right.
Like, he's not trying to do science. He's trying to get at something that's even more foundational.
Right.
That underpins, like, all of our understanding of entity.
Underneath science, right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you've mentioned Dasein a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I think it's time we really try to unpack this.
Okay.
Because it's a pretty key term for Heidegger.
Absolutely. So Dasein, it literally translates to being there.
Okay.
But it's much more profound than just, like, being located somewhere.
Okay.
It's how he refers to the entity whose being is, like, the focus of his whole project. And that entity is, us.
Us.
Human.
Okay.
Human existence. So when you see the word Dasein, you can basically think human being. But it's got all these extra layers that he's going to, unpack for us.
Right, right. Okay. And then this idea of being in the world.
Yeah.
This is not just about where we are physically.
No.
Right? It's a much bigger idea about how we exist.
Exactly. It's not like a book being on a shelf.
Right.
It's Dasein's, like, fundamental state. Like, its very way of being.
Okay.
And he says it shapes all of its other ways of being. And he calls it an existentiale, which is, just a fancy way of saying, like, a fundamental structure
of
Dasein.
So, like, being in the world is kind of like baked into what makes us us.
Okay.
As Dasein.
So it's not just about a human body being, like, physically located in an environment.
No.
It's something much more, like, connected to our existence.
Yeah, it's like an intrinsic part of what it means to be Dasein.
Okay.
It implies a relationship with that world, an active involvement.
Right, right. Not just like, oh, I happen to be here.
Yeah.
I'm involved. I'm engaged. Exactly. So think about, like, I don't know, using a tool, right?
Yeah.
You're not just near the tool.
Right.
You're engaged with it.
Right.
You have a purpose,
Yeah.
You're using it to achieve something.
Yeah. Okay.
So now that we understand that we as Dasein are, kind of fundamentally being in the world, let's look at how this, this involvement, how it shapes the way we actually encounter things.
Right. And that leads us to another pair of his concepts, which is readiness to hand, Zuhandenheit.
Yes.
And presence at hand, Vorhandenheit. And these are like really different ways that we experience things in our world.
Yes. So readiness to hand is about how we typically experience things when they're useful to us in everyday life. So, you're building something, you have a hammer.
Right.
You don't really observe the hammer as like this object,
right,
detached from you.
Yeah.
It's a tool. You're going to use it to achieve something.
Yeah.
So its being is really defined by its serviceability.
Okay.
Like its usefulness, its involvement in what he calls a context of assignments or references. So basically, like, it points beyond itself.
Right.
To the nails you're going to hammer, to the wood you're using, to the purpose of building the thing,
Yeah.
So it's almost transparent in its usefulness.
Okay, so the thing is defined by its function, by its usability within this network of, like, your concerns and your goals.
Exactly.
And it's not just about its physical properties, it's about what it lets you do.
Exactly. It's about, like, what it enables in that context.
Okay.
Now, presence at hand, that's different.
Okay.
That's when something becomes like an object of observation.
Okay.
Detached from your immediate use. So imagine that same hammer.
Okay.
But now it's broken.
Right.
It's no longer serving that purpose.
Yeah.
You're not building with it anymore. You're looking at it. You're examining the crack in the handle. You're trying to figure out, how do I fix this? Or do I need a new hammer?
Right.
It's become like this object.
It's become conspicuous.
Yes, exactly. It's brokenness.
Yeah.
Has kind of like forced it into your attention.
Right. Okay.
And he says, look, this presence at hand mode, it's actually secondary to readiness to hand.
Okay.
Things originally experienced as ready to hand.
Okay.
And then when something, goes wrong or becomes an obstacle, then it sort of pops out.
It shifts into this other mode.
Exactly.
Okay.
So think about your phone, right?
Yeah.
You're using your phone, you're navigating, to get somewhere.
Yeah.
It's ready to hand.
Yeah.
But then it freezes.
Right.
All of a sudden, you're not thinking about navigation.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the phone as this thing that's not working.
Right.
You're looking at it. You're trying to figure out what's wrong.
Right.
It's become present at hand.
Right. It's so interesting how he, presents this. It's like our primary way of engaging with the world is through usefulness and involvement.
Yeah.
It's through that lens.
And then when something disrupts that, that's when it becomes this object of scrutiny.
Right. Right.
Heidegger says worldhood of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is this? What is this worldhood? Well, it's the underlying condition that allows entities to be discovered either way. So whether you're using something or you're just observing it, the worldhood is kind of like the context, the pre-existing context of meaning and relationships.
Right.
It's like this web of purposes
that
makes it possible for us to both engage practically and observe theoretically.
So for you, the listener, thinking about your own daily experience, how often do you actually stop and observe the objects around you?
Yeah.
In a really detached way, as opposed to just using them, in your everyday life as part of your concerns, your activities? It's a really different way to think about how we fundamentally relate to the world.
Yeah, I think so.
And so much of it is about how things show themselves in our experience, right?
Yeah.
And that brings us to another important concept for Heidegger, which is phenomenology.
Okay.
Often, summarized in that phrase, to the things themselves.
Right.
But what does he mean by that?
So for Heidegger, when he says phenomenon, it's not just any appearance or anything that shows up. He very specifically says it's that which shows itself in itself.
Okay.
So it's about letting something be seen in the way that it inherently is.
Okay.
Without putting our own, theories or frameworks or interpretations on it.
Right.
It's about being open to what appears.
Okay.
And he makes this distinction between phenomenon and semblance. Right? So it's not just about how things seem, which could be deceiving.
Right.
Right? So semblance is when something just looks like something else.
Okay.
But isn't.
Right.
So, think about a mirage in the desert.
Right.
You see that shimmering water?
Yeah.
That's a semblance. It seems like water, but it isn't.
Right.
What's really there is the sand, the heat waves, and they're causing that illusion.
Yeah.
So Heidegger says semblance is kind of like a falling away from the real thing, from the genuine showing.
Right.
So for something to even seem like something else, there has to be something real there that it's distorting or covering up.
Right. So phenomenon is really different from just appearance.
Exactly.
Yeah, which can be really superficial or misleading.
Right.
This is about getting to the thing itself.
Yes.
Right, in its most authentic way.
Exactly. How does it present itself directly without all the extra stuff?
And so phenomenology, that's his method to actually get at this, right? To let the thing show itself from itself.
Yes. It's the practice of just really being open to how things present themselves in our experience.
Yeah.
Without, getting in the way with our own preconceptions. And so that phrase, to the things themselves.
Yeah.
That's the heart of it. Let's get back to the things themselves.
And that resonates, I think, a lot with that desire for those aha moments.
Yeah.
Right? You want to see things in their truest, most direct way.
Without all the filters.
Yeah.
Now, Dasein isn't just being in the world as a solitary individual, right?
Right.
Heidegger says we are also fundamentally being with.
Okay.
We are being with others.
So how does this social aspect of our being shape his understanding?
So he says that we encounter others in the world right away, right from the start.
Okay.
And it's part of our being in the world. It's not like we're these isolated subjects that then have to find each other and connect.
Okay.
It's more like others are already part of the world that we're in.
Okay.
Our concerns, our projects, they unfold in a world where others are already there.
Right. So it's not this idea of I bump into you.
Yeah.
It's more like we're in the same world and we're always kind of dealing with that fact.
Yeah, we're always already, as he might put it, being with.
And he makes a distinction, too, between different types of being with.
Yes, he does.
Right. There's this more authentic being with.
Yeah.
And then there's something that's maybe less authentic, even maybe detrimental to our being.
Exactly. So authentic being with, it's about a genuine shared dedication to something, some common affair.
Okay.
So people come together, they truly connect, they respect each other's freedom, their perspectives, and they work together in a way that fosters, genuine understanding and collaboration.
Okay.
It's like truly being there for one another.
Yeah.
In pursuit of something that's meaningful.
Okay, so what about the less authentic types? What does that look like?
So every day being with can be quite superficial, right?
Yeah.
It can be based on just coincidentally doing the same thing.
Okay.
You're both sitting on the bus, but you don't really have any connection beyond that. Or it can even be driven by negative stuff, mutual suspicion or competition. Yeah. Where the with is more about guardedness.
Okay.
Than genuine connection. He uses the example of people who get hired for the same job.
Right.
And they bond over their suspicion of management.
Right.
But not over, actually working together.
Okay. Right. And so that brings us to a somewhat unsettling concept, which is the they, Dasein.
A theys, yes.
This anonymous they that he says plays a big role in our everyday existence.
Yeah, who is this they?
Right.
What is this they?
It's not a person. Right.
No, it's not any specific person. It's not a group. It's more like the anonymous who of everyday Dasein.
Right.
So it's this generalized other that we often conform to without even thinking about it. It's almost like, the voice of public opinion, social norms, the way one generally does things.
So it's this background hum of expectations of how we should think, how we should feel, how we should act, and we just kind of absorb this and we act on it.
And we don't even realize it often. We don't question it.
Right.
So he says, look, in our everyday being with, Dasein is often subtly subjected to the they.
Okay.
And it leads us to kind of lose our own way of being.
Right.
The they dictates what possibilities are acceptable, what's important, what's not important.
Right.
And it exerts this almost inconspicuous domination.
Right.
By just establishing these norms and expectations that we, tend to follow.
And it can really explain that feeling, when you just go along with the crowd. You do something because that's what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Don't even think about it.
You just kind of get swept up in it.
Right. But then when you step back, you think, wait, do I really want this?
Am I making this choice?
Yeah, is this my choice or is this the they choice?
Exactly. Yeah. And it highlights how easily we can lose sight of our own individual perspective, our own possibilities,
Right.
and even like our authentic selves.
Yeah. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit, Heidegger also discusses state of mind, Befindlichkeit.
State of mind, okay.
How do our moods and feelings, like our overall emotional state, shape our understanding of being in the world?
Heidegger says Dasein is never without a state of mind.
Okay.
Some kind of prevailing mood, a fundamental feeling.
Okay.
And it's not just some superficial thing, like, oh, I'm happy today, I'm sad today.
Right.
It's more fundamental than that. He says our state of mind discloses to us that it is of our thrownness.
Yeah.
So like the basic fact that we are thrown into existence, into this world at this time without choosing it.
Right.
And our state of mind, even if it's just boredom or anxiety, whatever it is, it makes us aware of that being in the world.
So, even something like anxiety, which we think of as a negative emotion, he's saying it reveals something about our existence.
Yeah. And that's a key point, right? Like even these states that we might consider negative, they're not just, bad feelings.
Right.
They're actually ways in which our being in the world becomes manifest.
Right.
Becomes something that we actually feel and experience.
Yeah.
Now, he says, look, states of mind are primarily disclosive.
Okay.
They open up our being to us.
Yeah.
But he acknowledges that in our everyday, interpretations, they can also lead us astray.
Right.
They can lead to misinterpretation.
Okay.
Even delusions.
Okay.
So, our moods can color how we see things.
Right.
And we might not be seeing them accurately.
Right.
But he also says that this capacity for delusion, it's not entirely a bad thing.
Okay.
It also has a positive side to it.
Okay. How so?
He says it's precisely because our view of the world kind of shifts and changes.
Yeah.
According to our state of mind.
Yeah.
That the ready to hand, so those tools and resources we use can show themselves in their, specific relevance.
Okay.
The world is not static.
Right.
Yeah. It reveals different possibilities depending on how we're tuned in.
Okay.
At any given moment.
And so even something like pure theory, which we might think of as this very rational, detached, objective kind of knowing.
Right.
He's saying, no, even that has its roots in state of mind.
Yeah. Like even the most abstract theoretical inquiry.
Yeah.
Starts from somewhere. It starts from a state of mind, a way of being open to the world.
So it's not this pure reason detached from everything else.
No. It always starts from somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's coming from our lived experience.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Heidegger goes on to talk about understanding Verstehen and projection at Worf.
Okay.
So, how does the teen actually understand itself and the world and its possibilities?
Right, its possibilities.
Yeah. So for him, understanding is not just grasping facts or information.
All right.
It's more about how Dasein exists. It's a way of being.
Okay.
And he says it's about projecting itself onto its possibilities.
Okay.
So we're constantly envisioning what we could become.
Right.
How we can engage with the world.
Right.
And that projective character.
Yeah.
So what he says constitutes Dasein's sight.
Okay.
It's our particular way of seeing and understanding things.
So it's how we make sense of things is by projecting ourselves into those possibilities.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this sight, he says, it manifests itself in different ways.
Okay.
Depending on, how we're being in the world at that moment.
Okay.
So there's the circumspection of concern.
Okay.